Now, a Target 12 consumer investigation, patient protection.
Rhode Island law requires health insurance companies to cover mastectomy procedures for breast cancer patients.
But a state representative tells us insurance companies are taking advantage of what he calls a loophole in that law.
Target 12 consumer investigator Susan Campbell has the story.
Majority Leader Joe Shekarchi says insurance companies have dramatically increased copays and deductibles since 2005. And he says some breast cancer survivors are forced to cover the cost of medical supplies they'll need after surgery, including compression sleeves. He says that was never the intention of the law that was passed more than a decade ago.
I was panic-stricken.
Joan Milas couldn't believe the diagnosis. She had breast cancer.
I have no genetic history, exercise regularly. It was just the luck of the draw.
Joan and her doctors decided the best course of treatment was a bilateral mastectomy. For her, it was a months-long process.
So for me, they had to go back in because part of the process wasn't as successful as it could have been. No fault of the doctors, it's the fault of my body.
Joan says her insurance company didn't want to pay for it. She found out the company was battling the hospital and even stopped her coverage.
I stood at my kitchen counter in tears, going, I can't stay like this. It's a continuum of care. I mean, it's all the same process. It should not be treated as individual components.
In 2005, the Rhode Island General Assembly passed a law requiring insurance companies to cover mastectomy procedures. House Majority Leader Joe Shekarchi says over the years, insurers have chipped away at that coverage.
What the insurance companies have been able to do legitimately and legally under the current law is to increase copays and co-shares and also limit what they cover as part of the mastectomy procedure. Coupled with the fact that you've had a mastectomy or you're going to have one, you shouldn't have to go through that extra burden.
We reached out to the executive director of the Rhode Island Business Group on Health. In an email, he said the organization has not evaluated this bill yet. But in general, he said all mandated benefits should be scrutinized to assess the value versus the cost, because the additional cost impacts someone else's coverage. Joan is now 8 years cancer-free.
I'm grateful that I'm able to advocate for myself, and I can't help but think about all the poor people who can't. And those are the people that a bill like this really benefits.
Shekarchi expects a hearing to be scheduled on the bill in the coming weeks. With the Target 12 investigator Susan Campbell, Eyewitness News.
This investigation continues on Eyewitness News at 6. We're going in-depth, breaking down more details of this proposed law and looking at what other states require this kind of coverage for breast cancer patients.
New details in a Target 12 consumer investigation, patient protection. At 5, we told you about a proposed law targeting what one state rep calls a loophole in insurance coverage for breast cancer patients.
And new at 6, a closer look at that law and others like it across the country. Target 12 consumer investigator Susan Campbell has the details.
Federal law requires most group insurance plans that cover mastectomies for breast cancer patients to also cover reconstruction. 37 states from Alaska to Rhode Island also have laws that require insurance companies to cover procedures related to mastectomy and reconstruction surgery. Rhode Island House Majority Leader Joe Shekarchi says this bill requiring insurance companies to cover mastectomies will close what he calls a loophole in state law.
We as a state should give women who go through that procedure the protection they deserve.
A law requiring mastectomy coverage has been on the books in Rhode Island for more than a decade. But Shekarchi says insurance companies have chipped away at that coverage and have made deductibles unaffordable.
While the actual procedure is still covered, all of the ancillary materials, equipment, and stuff that goes along with it is not covered. The intent of the General Assembly was to have that procedure covered and everything that goes along with it.
Oh, it is. I believe it's an unintended consequence, but a consequence nonetheless.
Joan Milas is an 8-year breast cancer survivor. She says this legislation is important for breast cancer patients.
No one predicted that, copays would reach the thousands of dollars that they are today.
She says in the future, the proposed law could also help people facing other diagnoses.
I'm certain that it's not exclusive to mastectomy. A lot of surgeries have multiple components. Well, each component shouldn't be considered a separate procedure. You can't stay like that. It has to be from start to finish.
The executive director of the Rhode Island Business Group on Health said the organization has not yet evaluated this bill, but said in general any mandated benefits should be scrutinized to assess the value versus the cost. He said, quote, the additional cost impacts someone else's coverage. With the Target 12 investigator Susan Campbell, Eyewitness News.
For more coverage